set? Okay, so for the people at home watching, this is Public Works Committee. Our Vinnie Piccirillo, the chair, Tony Palumbo's the vice chair, Kenny Woodland's the secretary. The purpose of this meeting is to review the 2019 local road construction projects and make a recommendation to the town council. So I'm going to turn it over to Matt Schuman, the town engineer.
Thank you. I am working a little bit of a cold today, so if I lose it, excuse me, or if I can't project as well as I usually do, excuse me. But here we are again already. Construction season just ended maybe 2 weeks ago, and we're already talking about next year's construction season. Our agenda tonight is pretty similar to what we've done the past couple of years. We're going to talk a little bit about the road program in general. We're then going to talk a little bit about the elements of the road construction. Is that something that we've gotten a lot of comments and questions about from residents and councilors over the past year? I'll give you an update on where our projects are from this construction season, discuss proposed roads for next year, and then give you some updates on larger capital projects and our Complete Streets program. So as we usually present our key facts, probably doing roughly 3/4 of a mile of work between sewer, water, drain, and gas. Certainly, we were impacted this year by the National Grid strike. I believe they started work on Lexington Street and then were shut down by the state. And that's definitely impacted our needs in our program this year. But you can see we did also roughly 3/4 of a mile of road reconstruction last year. And like we usually like to present, our 72 centerline miles of roads and our pavement condition index of 65. That's based on the 2016 pavement management plan that we put together. And this, I know you're not really going to be able to see it, but this gives you a kind of a geographic display of where roads have been done in town. It also includes some roads that have been done through mitigation, through Chapter 90, through other funds, MassDOT, et cetera. So today's discussion is about our road program. As we usually discuss that we have a couple of different elements of our road program. Some fall more under maintenance and repair. Some of the sectional mill and overlays that you see in certain neighborhoods where we're doing short sections, not doing the entire street. Those fall under maintenance. Those are not what we're going to be discussing today. We're going to be focusing on pretty much full-length streets that we're proposed to reconstruct. We have two options for reconstructing them, road reclamation and mill and overlay. The past few years, we've been doing a lot of road reclamation as opposed to the mill and overlay. We've discussed a lot of that in detail in some of the previous years' presentations, and again, you'll be seeing a lot of road reclamation today. So the goals of our road program is to be coordinated with the various utility projects that are going on, looking to prolong the life of our streets, whether it's through the maintenance activities or through long-term or large-scale reconstruction, and also coordinating and looking at each project in terms of all users of the roads, not just vehicles, so taking a complete streets approach. So the typical elements of our road reconstruction program, as we said, road reclamation and paving. Here you'll see, this is Boylston Street. They're stripping some asphalt there. That's kind of one of the elements. Drainage repairs, curbing, sidewalks, ramps. You know, again, these are things we have discussed at other in the past at other meetings in more detail. But the typical elements is we're trying to install curbing to protect pedestrians, to define the road from the sidewalk, to provide some green space in terms of a grass border. We seek to install everything in accordance with the American with Disabilities Act, et cetera. So now I have a bunch of slides with pretty pictures, because a lot of the questions we've been getting in terms of notifications and just information we're putting out there is that we don't, you know, the public doesn't necessarily understand what some of these terms are and what the impacts are, and it's very difficult to put it in words or put it in a notice. So I felt maybe I'll just put it in our slides this year, and we'll go through it that way. So the first element you see here is the actual reclamation process. It's also called pulverizing. You can see on the lower left photo kind of what that pulverization is. They're literally digging up the road, or not excavating, but they're kind of grinding it and pulverizing it together, taking the base and the layers underneath it, grinding it all together, and you see kind of that fluffy stuff. That's the excess bituminous and excess material that they'll then have to remove to set grades on the street. You can also see just on the upper right, I think that's the grader there, just doing some grading on the street.
Actually, that's the reclaimer.
Is that the
That's the
reclaimer? I can't
reclaimer.
even see.
Grader.
So here we go, grading and compaction, and here we have, again, Boylston Street and Common Street. So this gives you an idea as we're getting ready to do our binder or our first course of paving, and now you're really starting to see the base of the road getting set and being put together, and the actual grade of the road. So, when we're putting in curbing in, we often have to lower the road because there's no curbing now. Curb is 6 inches of reveal, so we need to get that 6 inches. Binder paving, this is the first level. This really provides the strength for the pavement, and this is something that's different than a mill and overlay. In a mill and overlay, you're just taking off the top course or the wearing course surface. Here, we've taken everything out. We've rebuilt the base. This is the first layer of pavement. We do two layers of paver, the binder and the top. Then we have the curb installation, and here's some pictures, again, from Boylston Street and from Chauncey Street at the Hosmer School. And again, I just wanted to give these pictures to give you a sense, folks don't really understand what some of the impacts are, and we do try and describe it. And again, I feel like, part of this is to be a reference to residents when they have questions, that hopefully they can look at these pictures and maybe it'll give them a sense of what they're gonna see on their street. But here you can see, again, the curbing being set on the top right. On the bottom left, you can see concrete truck putting concrete in front of the curb, and that's just to hold the curb in place as we go. Next, we have sidewalk, driveway, and ramps. Here, again, just to give you a sense of what's going on when we're putting these things in, on the top left, you can see them forming the sidewalks. So they've ripped the sidewalks out where they are. They're setting the forms. The forms have to be set certain widths. They need to meet certain percentages for ADA again. And then on the top right, you can see they're actually finishing off the concrete after it's been poured. And just on the bottom right, you can see a handicap ramp that's been poured. The important thing to keep in mind that this is not a one-day job. It can take a couple of days between stripping the asphalt, setting the forms, and actually pouring the concrete. Again, here's just some more pictures as you see. And another thing that we get questions about is, you ripped up part of my driveway. Why did you do that? And here you can kind of see in the top photo where we've had to pull back some of that sidewalk or some of that driveway. And the issue with that is when we're putting the sidewalk in, we're changing elevations, and we need to match what's on people's private property to match the new elevations of the sidewalk, or in this case, it's actually the driveway that we're putting in. And you can also see some other pictures of this driveway after it's been poured, some sidewalk after it's been poured. And again, this is, particularly with the driveways, this is a couple-day job because they're pulling out the asphalt. They're then going to be setting the forms, and they're going to be pouring the concrete. So, that's something that we get questions about is, how long am I not going to have access to my driveway? Sometimes it's going to be a couple of days. Transition repairs. This is what comes after, and a lot of people, they see that we have to rip up some of their driveway to make that transition, but they don't recognize that we're going to be back and that we're going to be doing paving and making it whole again. So you can see a couple of different transition examples. The top two are our driveways. The bottom is where we installed a new sidewalk on Everett Ave, and you can see there's quite a bit of a slope there that we had to cut into. And in that case, to make the transition, we ended up putting some granite curbing at the back to sort of form a wall. So there's a large variety of transition issues that come up when we're doing a road project. We'll talk a little bit about notifications very shortly, but these are things that we're trying to get residents to be aware of beforehand, that there might be some impacts, and also try and be proactive with discussing impacts when they become larger than anticipated. So just in terms of planning and notifications, this is something we also get a lot of questions about. So, the town council in December, January is going to approve the plans. Well, what happens next? Or they're going to approve the streets. What happens next? So we have done preliminary design or preliminary field work to kind of identify costs. We've tried to come up with a program that fits within the cost constraints that we have. We need to then do detailed analysis of impacts. So as we do every year, we meet with the tree warden, who's now in our department, so that actually helps quite a bit, and we review existing street trees and potential street tree locations. We then review driveways with the zoning enforcement officer, again, trying to make sure that the driveways that are there are going to be replaced, meet to the maximum extent practicable the current zoning requirements. If we have geometric changes where we're doing bump outs or some sort of traffic calming, we'll do some we'll make some more schematic plans up, plan out geometric changes. Something that we've gotten into the last couple of years after our experience on Edenfield Ave is doing a green infrastructure review, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a little bit. And then reviewing sewer and drain infrastructure as needed to make sure that we're not going to have any unforeseen issues afterwards. In terms of notifications, one thing we did a little bit differently this past year is we sent out a letter in the late winter just notifying residents that your street's coming up in the spring or in the summer, because we found a lot of folks don't really know what streets are approved or if their streets being done. So in that letter, we included some pertinent information about the road moratorium. If you don't have gas and you want a gas service, please do it now because you're not going to be able to cut the road open afterwards. We encourage them to plant street trees. We included the street tree request form. And again, working with zoning, we discussed driveway impacts. Our construction notifications during construction are fairly standard for what communities do during a construction project. We'll notify them again in general of the project, but a few days before it's scheduled to start, and then at significant milestones during the project. So it's not possible for us to notify residents of every single activity that's going to go on a job. It's not possible to notify them that the contractor is, taking a day or two off because of weather or for other reasons. But, when the binder's going down, when the reclamation's happening, when your driveway is going to be impacted, we make sure that folks are notified at that point. So just a quick update on where our streets are from 2018. Here's Arden Road before and after. You can see, just to illustrate the change and the improvement that goes on with these road improvement projects. This project is essentially complete at this time. There may be some minor issues. We have to go back with the contractor next year, but for all intents and purposes, it's complete. As is Priest Road. Priest Road was done pretty early this season. This is a picture of Malden Street. This is an area where we do have some transition repairs we need to go back to next year with, again, some wall issues, some loaming issues. A lot of those things, especially when you're doing work later in the season, the contractor ends up coming back and finishing those up. Everett Ave, this is not the best picture, but there's a little view of where we teed up and did a slight bump out at the Bartlett and Everett intersection at the top of the hill. Edgecliff Road, I think I may have gotten the pictures messed up there, but that gives you a good sense of what Edgecliff Road looks like now that we're finished. And again, Edgecliff Road is at binder course level. We haven't put that top course level on. We'll be in next spring to do that. One of the highlights for us for Edgecliff Road was the installation of 2 tree trenches, as we talked about a little bit before. As part of our green infrastructure review. We now are under a new permit from the EPA for what's called our NIPDES program, and we are required to do nutrient reduction. These tree pits, which consist of underground pipe that allows the water to infiltrate into the ground or percolate into the ground, are a great way of taking the water out of our system and also doing the nutrient treatment. So we were able to put 2 of those in this year, and something that, again, working on the success of Edenfield Ave, we'll be looking to do in the future. So So Westland Road, again, Westland, Edgecliff, and Woodley were all sort of one neighborhood where we did all the streets together, and they're all in about similar condition. Hosmer Safe Routes to School project, you know, a very difficult project in terms of coordinating with MassDOT and the contractor and the school. But they pretty much finished up all the road and the sidewalk, and they will be back to do landscaping and top course paving next year. Common Street, and I'm not sure why this is doing that, but for some reason there are two slides. So they've shut down for the winter. They'll be back in the spring. As you guys, I'm sure, are aware, they got just past Columbia Street, and they'll have the signal work that they will have to do at Spring Street, and they're waiting. Unfortunately, the material is still on order, but they'll be back in the spring to finish the projects up, and of course, the project includes Orchard Street Extension and Catherine Road. In terms of the 2019 road reconstruction list, just as we do every year, we review our pavement management inventory. We do windshield surveys of the streets. We look at our maintenance records, streets that our highway department are out doing lots of potholes, or the potholes aren't really doing their job, capital projects that we've done or are planning, and, you know, resident input. A lot of people don't believe me, but that really does have an input into our program. You know, as I just discussed a little bit before, you know, we do detailed cost estimates to try and get a sense of what type of program we can put together, what streets will fit within our budgetary constraints, prioritizing streets in the greatest state of disrepair, looking geographically, looking at a bunch of different other things. And again, our utility coordination and capital planning, we talked a little bit about the linear footage of projects that were done this year. I've listed our water main program this year, as well as our sewer and drain replacements, and, you know, the impact from National Grid stopping. You know, it's important to remember that just because we've done a utility project on a street, unfortunately, that doesn't mean we're going to be at the street next year to do improvements. So, you know, I think there's a sense amongst residents, or a misperception that, you know, once the gas main's in, you guys are going to come and pave it. And, you know, we all wish that was the case, but it's not. So here we are, we're presenting our program for this year, and you'll see a variety of different utility improvements that have been done over the years on the streets. So here's our proposed list. Again, this is looking at the needs and budgetary constraints of the program. Bellevue Road, Avon Road, Chandler Street, Burnham Street, Bridgham Ave, a section of Nichols Ave, and a section of Bartlett Street. So Bellevue Road, we're looking at doing the west side of Bellevue Road from Shanning Road to Common Street. That road is in, I would say, tremendous state of disrepair. It's probably one of the worst in the city or the town. We did have gas main replaced in 2015, and we had water main replaced in 2017. It's also important to remember, for our water main, we actually, in sections, installed 2 water mains. So in some sections of that road, we have three trenches. Avon Road.
Jennings, where it turns, right, with a big.
It goes up the hill.
Yeah,
Yep.
Where the guardrail is.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Avon Road, gas main replaced in 2015. We're finding a bunch of the hill streets are really, you know, they probably were not in good shape before. The last couple of years are really beating down on them. We have a couple other streets that are starting to become priority but need gas mains. Avon Road had the gas main replaced. That's one of the reasons why we're prioritizing it for this year. Chandler Street.
Just one question. So Avon Road, what's that little street between Avon and Common Street? Sunset?
Yeah.
Is that?
Right, that's not included in this. This is just including Avon Road.
Okay.
So Chandler, Burnham, and Bridgham are also sort of a neighborhood. They had they each had gas main replacement in 2015 and water main replaced in 2016. They're in a pretty decent state of disrepair. Again, there's some sidewalk network gaps on the street. There's some berm or grass or paved borders in that area. This gives you a sense of Burnham Street. and Bridgham Ave. Bridgham Ave, there are some sections that have curb already, but the road is fairly deteriorated itself. And again, it ties in with the other two streets that we're proposing and was part of the water main and gas main replacement. Nichols Ave from Dexter to Boylston, this was done in 2016 for gas repairs. It's a pretty important street connecting some of the schools in the area. And it has, multiple trenches, some drainage issues as well, street drainage that need to get taken care of. And finally, Bartlett Street, including a small section of Everett Ave. This street, kind of, when we did the adjacent streets on Everett and Malden, we thought we had given the neighborhood, we hadn't given the neighborhood enough misery, so we figured we'd add Bartlett Street on. But in all seriousness, you can see in the picture on the right, the top course pavement is actually really unraveling because of the hill and because of erosion. And on top of that, the binder that's underneath it is starting to fail as well. So it's not something that we had considered doing a mill and overlay on, but the mill and overlay really isn't going to achieve anything when the binder underneath it's failing. One thing in terms of lessons learned from our work on Everett and Bartlett, and also looking at the left where some of those walls and trees are, this is a street we would not propose to be putting sidewalks on. Sections of the street do have sidewalks, so if we have sidewalks or an opportunity to add sidewalks with relative ease and with the owner interested, we will consider that. But unfortunately, just the width of the road precludes putting sidewalks in. It's also a relatively secluded neighborhood, so there's not heavy traffic. There's really not necessarily a need for sidewalks. So I know I ran through.
Just one last, could you just go back 2 slides? So Nichols Avenue is striped with a double yellow line, as you can see in the picture. But the reality is people park on both sides of it, and that the whole idea of people just driving, like straddling the double yellow line is sort of the reality, which is, of course, under the traffic laws, is illegal to do. So what is the question, if we were when we redo this, what would be the final pavement marking? Are we gonna stripe it with a double yellow line, which would imply you couldn't park on either side? Or are we gonna go with the regular neighborhood condition where you park on both sides in the center lane with the...
Well, we've discussed the parking situation a little bit. We haven't discussed the double yellow line, but, our intent is to put in the road to the 24-foot wide width that it is right now. We're not proposing any parking changes. Certainly, if the neighborhood is interested in that, they can pursue that through the Traffic Commission. This section of Nichols Ave, although, it certainly is a little bit carries probably a little bit more traffic volume than a typical street. It's certainly not like the section of Nichols Ave down by the school or down by Arlington Street. In terms of how that impacts the double yellow line, I haven't gotten that far. Some schools of thought say don't put the double yellow line in because the double yellow line can encourage speeding, makes you think you're on a main street. So that's something, we'll have to discuss a little bit more as we move forward.
Yeah, I just, my concern is, we've done some streets and we've put stripe lines, and, if you're gonna, Summer Street is an example of, you can park on one side, but of course, the yellow line is down the middle, so if you park legally, now you actually, the line should have been over, 8 feet, so you could actually have two-way traffic on either side of the yellow line. So I think, the intent of the yellow line is to separate 2 opposing lanes of traffic. If we're gonna allow parking, I think on the Uniform Traffic Control Devices Manual, it would not qualify for putting a double yellow line. I mean, that would be, so I think if we're gonna just do it 24 feet curb to curb like we do with residential streets, we would not stripe Nichols Avenue from Dexter to Boylston with a double yellow line, because it sort of sends the wrong message to the motorists. But
Yep.
something, I mean, we don't need to decide tonight, but I just wanted to raise that issue, that this is one of those weird instances where it's not right.
Right. So just in going through a couple of other updates, I know I blew through the road program pretty quickly. I'm sure there'll be a bunch of questions. But, again, we're continuing with Mount Auburn Street, our design, based on our previous meetings, developing a 25% design. Watertown Square, we continue to have some internal discussions about scheduling additional meetings. That's sort of, our last meeting was in July. I think there's interest in continuing with that. Tied in with that is the work that MassDOT is doing on the south side of the bridge at the Galen, Nonantum, Watertown Street intersection. Our Arsenal Street corridor that's being done through Athena and the Arsenal Yards. Belmont Street facelift, that's something that we haven't talked too much. It came up a couple years ago, but we are working with the city of Cambridge on what they call it a facelift. It's a mill and overlay of Belmont Street from Brimmer Street to Mount Auburn Street. This very odd road at the town line actually kind of runs on the sidewalk, but then zigzags in a couple of spaces. So the Cambridge actually has control of the road. We have control of some of the sidewalk and some of the trees. You'll be hearing more about this in the next couple of months as Cambridge pursues a design, pursues some meetings, and further discussion. And then there's the community path extension that community development and planning is working in concert with us on. Update on our...
Before go back, so one of the things, so the Waverly Avenue Main Street intersection seems to have fallen off the list.
So I put the projects that are kind of at the front of the line on this list. Main and Waverly, we do have plans to upgrade the signals. You guys know as mitigation for the oil spill that we had a couple of months ago. They were generous enough to mill and overlay the street to buy us a little bit more time. But ultimately, we want to do taking a complete streets approach to Main Street. So we had started a little bit of a design preliminary for improvements at the intersection. That's still there. It's kind of not at the top of the list right now. So just to update on the complete streets, we haven't talked about this in a while, but you may be aware that we had a program last winter, actually, to put together a complete streets prioritization plan. It was accepted by MassDOT. We subsequently applied for 4 of the projects that were in our plan, which raised crosswalk at White's Ave, including widening the path through Salt and Stall Park, raised crosswalk on Warren Street at the Cunniff School to improve safety there, and crosswalk improvements on Watertown Street at Thurrock Park. We were quite fortunate. We applied for the $280,000 grant, and we received it. We anticipate that this work will happen next year. In fact, it has to happen next year based on the funding constraints. Whether we put it in with the road program or do it separately is a topic for internal discussion. But again, something to look forward to and hear more about in the future. And just in summary, we like to talk about some of the challenges that we go through, and certainly some of the councilors and the residents hear about some of these challenges from their constituents. We have a limited number of vendors bidding on the work, winning the work. It makes it a little bit more difficult to manage, because it's less competitive. You're maybe not getting the contractor that you really want. You're getting another contractor, or they themselves are managing multiple projects in many towns. It ends up being a little bit more work for us, and sometimes that's reflected in some of the times where we're getting the calls, why isn't work happening on my street? We do work with the contractors. We try and maintain a working relationship. We don't want to be down their back, but we also have to make some demands. We've also did our own little debrief internally last week with some of the other departments to discuss how can we manage these things, all aspects, a little bit better. We say weather every year. Weather can take a road that really wasn't a priority and make it a priority, as can the planned and unplanned utility work. And I think I personally have seen this over the past couple of years, where streets, the last year I drove down and they weren't, maybe weren't the greatest street, but now they're really, really bad. Whereas other streets, they were in the same shape and they still seem to be holding up. And then, funding and design for our collector roads and our longer streets. You know, we really, as you can see, focus on more of the residential streets in town. But even working within the $2.5 million or so that we get for our road improvements and repairs, you know, that really limits our ability to do longer streets, to do collector roads. You know, I think we've all seen the part of Waverly Ave that hasn't been finished is probably, you know, also in pretty terrible shape, but it's a major street. It's a little bit more work to do that. You know, there are plenty of other streets. Edenfield Ave, when we did Edenfield Ave last year, you know, we had the other half of Edenfield Ave asking us, well, why didn't you do our half? And I think, you know, even on Edenfield Ave, we had put supplemental funds in just to get that section done. And then, you know, just longer streets in general. You know, Moore Street is not necessarily a major road per se, but it's a long street. It does carry traffic, and it is also starting to deteriorate. So I think, you know, we left that open-ended as something that we feel should be discussed further. So just in summary, our road reconstruction list for this year: Bellevue Road, Avon Road, Chandler Street, Burnham Street, Bridgham Ave, Nichols Ave, and Bartlett Street. Thanks.
Thank you. That was a very great presentation and very helpful. So the first thing is, Kenny or Tony, do you have any questions on the presentation specifically?
Yeah, could you explain the tree trenches just a little more? I don't remember what slide it was. It's titled 2008 Road Reconstruction of Edgefield Road Green Infrastructure.
Yeah, so what you're looking at here, and I know it's kind of tough to see, just off the picture to the left where you can kind of see the elbow in the pipe.
Yeah.
Just next to that, you can kind of see the side of the catch basin. It's white. I know it's difficult to see in the picture, but there's the white edge of the concrete of the catch basin. And what you're seeing is this pipe is going to be underneath the sidewalk when it's done and the grass border. And when the water goes into the catch basin, it's first going to go actually into this pipe. In this pipe, again, you can't see it in the picture, it has holes in it that's perforated. So when it goes into the pipe, and then the water will percolate out through that gravel. So instead of going right into the drainage system, it's going into this pipe, and then percolating into the gravel. Now, in a heavy storm, you know, where maybe this doesn't have the capacity, it still has an overflow pipe that will connect it to the drainage system. So these are typically sized to take about an inch of rain and percolate it into the ground.
I apologize for that's on this, but what does it have to do with trees?
So typically we plant trees above them.
And so the water that's going through the pipe that seeps down into the gravel,
Yes.
you're assuming is going to feed the trees.
But also helps with the trees, yeah.
Is that the idea?
Yeah.
It feeds the trees? Is it actually, so, okay. And you said that we were required to do this?
So under our new NIPDES permit that came out effective October, in the future,
Permit? I'm sorry.
NIPDES, it's National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. It's basically, you know, it's called the
Okay,
Phase
I
2
thought you
permit, MS4 permit. Basically requires us to have a pretty involved stormwater program, which we have and have been doing, but it requires us to take some next steps, which we're certainly starting to look at. And one of the next steps is to be looking at ways to reduce stormwater in our system and reduce stormwater pollution. So these have been found to be effective at reducing stormwater pollution and reducing some stormwater flows right at the catch basin, as opposed to trying to do something way downstream. So you're trying to do lots of little ones instead of one big one at the end of the pipe.
So why this street and not other streets, and do you have plans to do on other
Yep.
streets?
So we actually did look at each street for 2018, and, you know, this is an example of some of the limitations of the green infrastructure. Everett and Malden on hills really aren't receptive for green infrastructure. It really needs to be relatively flat when you're going to do something like this. Other areas on Woodley and Westland, there was some ledge, so, you need to have good soils. We didn't have good soils. And then, we also didn't want to put these close to walls or other obstructions. In a couple of locations, we could maybe put it in, but it'd be right up against someone's wall. There could be construction issues, water issues. So, from the 5 or 6 streets that we did, we narrowed it down to 2 locations. And we'll go through a similar process.
For the next
year.
So do you think you'll be doing more of these at the other?
We hope to.
Yeah. So, and it's not an issue of money
No.
involved, it's just an issue
Well,
of whether the
Jerry
whole.
doesn't want me to say that. Well, we found that these are relatively low cost.
Well, this is relatively new, right? I mean, in the 3 or 4 years I've been
Yep.
sitting on this committee, I'm looking at past reports or summaries. This is the first time I've
Yep.
seen this,
The
right?
first year we did it was on Eden Field as part of the grant that we had, the
Oh,
319
right,
grant.
the other.
And so, I think taking some of the lessons learned from that, we are starting to move on to some other streets.
Okay. Can you just, when you started to developing a universe of projects, and you said you looked at the pavement inventory, the windshield survey, the maintenance records, the capital projects, and residents' input. Can you just talk a little bit about resident input? Because I don't know how you manage that, given the number of calls that I get about streets that I've been advocating for a few years. Somehow, they don't get on the list, but I just
Yeah,
wonder,
well,
how do you do this piece here?
So again, that usually when those concerns come in, it goes to myself, to Jerry, to Dennis, to the highway supervisor, and we'll look at the area in detail. We'll look at the actual condition of the road as a whole. We'll look at the utility work that's been completed, sidewalk needs, and from that we can kind of make a determination. And we also look at our pavement management program where it fits in terms of road conditions, and I'll give us a sense of where it is road condition wise. And based on that, we'll either determine, we need to do sidewalk repairs on the street. It's not quite ready for repairs, or, there's 3 houses, the road is really, really bad. Maybe if we mill and overlay that, we can get some more time out of it. Or, the road is in really poor shape, and, we really need to start considering that for road reconstruction.
So you follow up on concerns that.
Yes, we
people-
try to the
you-
maximum
You go
extent.
out and look and see and decide, so.
Yeah.
But now that we've picked these, I shouldn't recommend people calling you, but, because you.
Well, we're always happy to explain.
That's okay, I didn't mean it. I do want to ask you, though, about the side, one of these streets that's chosen for this coming year. I was surprised, and you said there's no sidewalks. Now, are we required to have sidewalks?
You're talking about.
Let me get that street again, it was.
Bartlett Street. I think, we had a lot of discussion internally on this. This street, really, based on the right-of-way, based on, you can see in the picture where utility poles are, walls, and the existing road itself, I think it would be cost prohibitive and virtually impossible to put a sidewalk in many spots. And I think, particularly, based on some comments we got from residents on Everett Ave in particular, in that neighborhood, there was really a sense of, we didn't really need sidewalks, we don't want sidewalks, and I'm not necessarily saying that we should, go with public opinion, but also taking into account the fact that it was an isolated neighborhood, and the impacts that we had in putting the sidewalks in, we just not recommending adding a continuous sidewalk on the street.
So right now, that when the picture shows, is it 24 feet?
I believe it's
From the
around
wall to
24
the-
feet. There,
Is
it
this-
might, I don't know exactly where that wall is with regards to the road, because again, some of the borders are paved, some areas may have been over-paved, but, we're projecting around 24 feet. But one of the issues we had in that neighborhood in particular is there are a lot of encroachments. So, those walls may be on town property, the issue becomes, do we go and force everyone to move walls that have been there for, longer than we've all been alive because we want to get a sidewalk in, and do we want to pay for it as well?
But would you be putting curbing in?
We would be putting curbing in, yeah. So, and as I said, if the opportunity arises where we can get sidewalk in, that's our goal. But, I don't want to commit to putting sidewalk on the entire street and then have a 5-foot retaining wall to put in to get the sidewalk in.
Okay. How many, do we have a lot of streets like this, Jerry?
I think this neighborhood is a little bit unique in the encroachments. I haven't really seen to this extent anywhere in town, but
I answer your question. I hate to get up. Matt's doing a fantastic job,
Of
as he
course.
always does. But there's a lot of sections around town, 1 or 2 houses where the old betterments weren't used and there's no sidewalk in locations. And I think this neighborhood, as Matt spoke of, is a little bit unique. I don't really see that we have a street like this in other sections of the town where we don't have a layout that might have some town property with it there. And I think Matt's right, the goal is not to get a full sidewalk, continuous length sidewalk there, but it's to achieve safe passage. And with all these streets, as we get into these streets, we may refer back to the Traffic Commission, and, it may be something that parking is looked at there, where there's some markings on it there, the street as well, to try and provide some safe passage. But it is also numerous problems with the retaining walls, and we're very well experienced with it after Everett Ave, as Matt had stated.
Yeah.
I hope that
Okay.
answers.
It just is unusual. I actually hadn't,
This is very unusual.
right?
yeah, I'd say Chandler Street is a street where, most of the street has sidewalks, but then you get to a couple of frontages where they don't have sidewalks, and, it's a pretty flat. There are none of these difficult grade issues, so that's an area where we would want to make a continuous sidewalk. I think this is really just a special case.
And then finally, just a question about the ones that you did last year that are still in the process of being finished up this year. And you used the word transitional, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so
Transitional elements.
transition,
So you just give me a sense of what do we mean by, I understand that you didn't put the second coat on, or the second.
Right, so the transition issues are are somewhat similar to what we had in these photos, though not nearly as, intense. But mainly, where the back of the sidewalk is meeting the private property, maybe they need to add a little bit loam that they missed, or, maybe they damaged, some bricks that they need to replace and they didn't get it to it this year.
Okay. And I did say final, but I have one other question that I've just, is an interest for me. Do we tell residents when we're going to, you said there's a lot of notification, and I saw the notification, and you do notify them when their driveway is going to be dug up a little bit?
Yes.
Okay. Do you ever get any concerns about the legality of the town digging up someone's driveway?
Not really. I mean, we try and notify them from the very beginning that these things are going to happen. And, part of the reason for adding this information in the slide is to make it a little bit clearer. If there's going to be something very major, we will discuss it with the residents beforehand. But in general, we may get a couple of questions. If the driveway was put in last year and I have a brand-new driveway, I really don't want you to cut it up. We'll try and work around it to the best that we can. Unfortunately, with these sidewalks, we will try and lay the sidewalks out to have the minimal impact that we can, but trying to have a curb reveal and trying to have ADA we're sort of stuck where we are with the sidewalks.
And so then, I will stop now after this question. You got, next year, we're looking at 7 new streets, plus the finishing up of the old ones that we still have, and you have a limited number of contractors. Now, do you feel comfortable, confident that we'll be able to complete the streets that you've chosen?
Yeah, the actual footage on these streets is similar to what we did this year. And I think, we've seen even last year in the past that the contractor's not necessarily finishing up at the very end of the season. He's starting anew or finishing up in the beginning of the season, and that actually helps us stagger the contracts. So, our goal is to try and get the next contract out as quickly as possible, but we still have a presence on the streets beginning of the season, and any emergencies that come up, we have someone under contract to handle. So I'm confident that we'll be able to handle this.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody from the audience have any questions on the presentation? And not, the prioritization of the roads, let's take that up as a second, but just questions on the presentation. Caroline?
So on Common Street, you said the material was on order, but it's finished for the winter?
So with the exception of installing the traffic signal, the work is done. So, you know, the traffic signal equipment has a very long lead time. They're working with the supplier and with the, it's a, you know, a specialty contractor who installs it. So as soon as the equipment comes in, they will put it in, the foundations are in, there's no actual excavation or concrete work that needs to be done. But in terms of, you know, continuing utility work or continuing sidewalks, that's done for the season.
And so the other thing was what else, so you said it's finished for the winter, but it's, project's not done, so what else is, where are we on the project and what?
Right, so as part of this phase, and I've lost where the slide is, but, you know, as part of this phase, they finished up to just past Middlesex Road. So the second phase, as we're calling it, will be to go from Middlesex Road, include the roundabout, include Catherine Road, the water main, and the street and Orchard Street extension.
So you're saying, okay, so the street is done, that was done up to,
The work, yeah, well, it's down to binder. It's at binder,
it's done,
yeah.
what exactly does that mean?
That's that first coat that we were talking about. So the top coat is not there yet.
That's
And of
what I
course,
was
you know,
gonna
final
say.
landscaping's not done,
Okay.
but the actual curb, the sidewalks are done.
Yeah, and if I could just put, so I've gotten complaints that, you know, they finished the road and how bumpy it is, you know, then the manhole. So once the northern part from Middlesex Road up to Orchard Street is done, then what they'll do is they'll, that's just the binder coat. That's the bottom, sort of the bottom 4 inches of this big stone paving. Then they'll come back, the very last thing they do is they'll raise all the casting, all the manholes and water shut-off valves. They'll raise them all 2 inches. That'll take a couple of weeks. And then they'll come in and put the finish coat, which is top 2 layer of asphalt, which is very fine sand. So it's a very smooth wearing layer. So the binder coat is, if you look at it, go out there and look at it, you see these big stones that are like, you know, 2 or 3 inches in diameter. That actually provides the strength to hold the weight of the vehicles. The wearing coat is just sort of the,
Is that so it'll all?
it's like the frosting on the cake, you know?
So it'll all be smooth?
And then it'll all be smooth. So there's a lot, you know, so people complain about Orchard Street or Columbia Street being like, you know, what a crappy job they did, is still all bumpy. It's like, well, that's just not the final paving. So it's just so everybody here and at home knows that, so. Anthony?
I just want to say, I'm really happy with how the Westland Woodley Edgecliff project worked out, because I used to live over there, and that was really, I thought, a very dangerous area. So I think the way the bump outs are, it's really going to slow traffic, and whereas people normally just blew right onto Edgecliff without stopping, I think it gives them pause. So I was really happy with how that turned out. And then, and I'm not sure if I'm using the word, if I have the correct word, but could you just talk a little bit about, is it retainage where you said that on certain of these projects, the contractor has to come back?
So any, you know, any actual work items that they haven't done, they haven't gotten paid for. Some small things where they have a little fix to do, we do hold what's called retainage. It's usually 5% of the value of the items. So, you know, in the worst case scenario, the contractor decides, I'm not gonna do it, which can have other implications, but I'm not gonna do it, I'm not coming back. The town has the money to hire another contractor to go and finish it up. So that is an additional level of protection for the town.
So then is that the DPW's responsibility to have to monitor to make sure those final?
Yes. What we do is we put a list together of all the issues and items that need to get addressed, and then it's called a punch list, and they punch them off.
Thank you.
Lisa?
Yeah, thanks for all your work. I know we have a lot of streets with attention. I wish that we had more data on, that, you know, basically backs up your presentation. It's great that you identify, you know, the categories that you use to identify or prioritize.
Um,
why you might go ahead and do that? And then the last question is, you know, some of them have sidewalks already, so how, I guess if you could speak a little bit to the importance of sidewalks and or, because we're trying to coordinate with trees as well, how that has affected your choices.
So some of the streets have not had water main repairs. You know, some of the streets have. There are a variety of utilities out there. We look at our utility needs when we're programming our water main program, our sewer program. So Avon Road and Nichols Ave have not had a need for water main. They did have gas main replaced. In terms of data, you know, certainly in the past, we've given the council the PCI of each road, the pavement condition index for each road. But, you know, again, this is when we get into the subjective part, that we're going out and doing the windshield surveys, looking at the streets, because even some of the streets, you can look at the PCI on the plan, and then you go out there and it's really not as bad or it's worse. So, you know, we do try and provide some information in terms of, you know, the type of repairs that have been done or need to be done, and we use those to develop the program. In terms of the trees, you know, we did discuss a little bit earlier, you know, we do walk the street with the tree warden afterwards to identify tree conditions and tree planting locations. We don't necessarily choose streets based on, you know, the canopy or trees that are there now versus what could be planted.
And just to be clear, I just want to clarify, so Avon Street, so we didn't replace the water main, but presumably as part of the study, the water quality study, it was a DEP study, was it?
Right, we have a water system
We
plan.
examined the water main on Avon Road, and we determined it was in good enough shape that we're not going to need to do anything for the next 25, 30 years. So that's why we decided we don't need to replace it.
Right.
But we did, correct me,
That was
correct me if I'm wrong, we did examine it and made the determination that the water main's in good shape, does not need to be replaced.
Right.
Okay. But, and also, before we repave the road, we will replace all
All
the service
Yes.
drops to
So-
the individual houses, which we will do, even though
Right.
that's not the water main, it's the water services from the main to the houses. Because that's usually what leaks, which causes emergency repairs to dig up the road.
Exactly.
So those two, but we've made that as part of our standard process since 2009.
Right.
Because if a sewer main's in good shape, we don't need to replace it, so, you know, at that point. Okay, I just wanted to be clear that, you know, that it's not like we're just ignoring it. But the important thing is replacing the service drops, because some of them are, none of them are lead in Watertown, but
Right.
many of them are galvanized steel or other,
We're bringing them up to current standards.
put the 1-inch copper instead of the
Correct.
3/4 inch or 5/8. So it'll be good water service for the future. So Caroline, you had another question?
I'm just curious, how many contractors do this?
I mean, we're maybe a half dozen out there, but we're tending to get, you know, 2, 3 bids a year. And, you know, our suspicion is that, you know, they kind of looking geographically and trying to figure out who's doing what, you know, obviously I said it on TV, but it's off the record, you know. But I guess it's on the
For the
record.
people watching at home.
Yeah, delete that part, please.
There's no collusion.
Yeah, no collusion. But yeah, you know, there are a very limited number of contractors that do that work. You know, and we're hoping, you know, between the Hosmer, Common Street, and our road program last year, we've had three different contractors in. We're hoping that, you know, they're encouraged to bid this year.
Okay, Lisa.
All right, one other thing, especially because I guess we're gonna go down here. I'm wondering if, and I'm still thinking of reconstruction, that's the whole up reconstruction part of it. So, I'm just wondering if there's coordination, given that planning like that committee and Safe Routes to School, you know, thinking about bike lanes and, as you say, safe passage, and what type of strength on the road, is there, any thoughts about that, or maybe drag these another year, or?
We actually, Counselor Picciarelli actually asked a question in regards to the double yellow line. But, typically, we will review the streets with the Complete Streets Committee and determine if any kind of improvements need to be made, more, or sort of more involved improvements need to be made above and beyond our curb and sidewalk repairs. Nichols Ave in particular, this section is 24 feet wide, so it doesn't lend itself very well to some of the bike facilities. But, I think to your point, one of the reasons why we're looking at Nichols Ave is because it does tie into, a little bit further down the line, the Safe Routes to School project to the Hosmer School and the school down at Elton Ave, private school.
Okay, Tony?
Can we, okay, is it okay now? Ask a question?
Yeah, if you had more questions.
Yeah. Just a quick reminder, mill and overlay usually is about 350
Yeah, I mean, it's,
feet, right?
yeah, in the past, we try and do it on the worst sections of the road. We're not trying not to bypass some of our other policies by doing an entire street, unless it's absolutely necessary. But, we're trying to look at, as more of a preventative maintenance, try and make improve the worst sections of streets to get some more, exactly.
Right, okay, so, and then, and you don't do any sidewalks when you usually do mill and overlay, right?
Depends.
You have a separate pot of money for sidewalk repairs?
We have a separate pot of money for that, and it really depends on the street. Sometimes, if we go down a street and the street's not in too bad shape, but the sidewalks are horrible, we sometimes will just do sidewalks. Anything that we do a mill and overlay on, if it's in an intersection, we need to bring it up into compliance with ADA, so we'll do that. If we're doing mill and overlay in a spot with really terrible sidewalks, we'll look at that as well.
Since you came down to these 7 streets here, right, you must have started with a lot more, right?
Like 100.
15, well, 100, but, so the ones that were right behind the 7, or like the number 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, are they automatically, do they help you figure out what we're doing next year?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a consideration. There are also, again, streets that really, I think are starting to be accelerated but need gas main. So, that might move it, and then there's the utility work. So it's a little bit of everything, and, some of these streets, particularly the Chandler, Bridgham, and Burnham were contenders last year, but got edged out by some other streets. So, it's not that, the number 8's automatically number 1 next year, but, there's certainly considerations.
But just I say, like a year ago, we talked a lot about Bellevue, as being just literally one of the worst streets in the entire city. But so we talked a lot about that, but it didn't get on the list last year, but this year it is on the list, so.
And we,
Not the side that you were talking,
What's that?
that's but not the side that you were talking about.
Yes, no,
The
this,
west side, not the east side.
this is the west side.
I know, but I remember talking about the east side.
No, it was, everybody that came and spoke was on the west side, the Standish Road, sort of level road side. So.
And
let me
that's-
ask you that, this has come up before, and I know Mount Auburn Street is, obviously, we're doing this major project, but is there any possibility of doing some mill and overlay at some of the worst parts of Mount Auburn Street this year coming? There's some parts of Mount Auburn that are like, I don't know, on one, particularly the right line, the one on the right, the lanes in the middle seem to be
Yeah, I
a
mean-
little out of shape, but the ones on the right are pretty bad. And I don't know if you can mill and overlay just a lane as opposed to is there any way to do some of that maybe?
I've stepped up to give Matt a break a little bit there as far as the difficult question. We're balancing the need of staying in position with the federal funding for Mount Auburn Street, at the same time trying to keep safe passage out there. And I think Matt and I have had this discussion, and Dennis as well, and a few others there, about we do know that we need to do some areas there. I mean, the area of Irving Street and Mount Auburn Street is atrocious right through that intersection there. And we've had some farther up by the cemetery heading towards Russell Ave and a few other things. So there's a lot of consideration on our part, but we also don't want to go to the extent of investing money when we know we have a project coming.
Right.
And,
But the project is a couple of years down the line, right?
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's a couple of winters before so you might be looking at some mill and overlay around Mount Auburn in the worst sections.
I think we most definitely will. It's just to what extent right now is undetermined.
Okay, great.
Sorry.
Thank you, good news, thank you.
Okay, Lisa?
Well, okay, so, do you ever produce a list for streets for reclamation, again, as far as like, it looked like that was part of tonight.
These streets are all gonna be full depth of reclamation.
These are good.
So these aren't mill and overlay, we're gonna do these as full depth.
But, okay, so I guess reconstruction reclamation is.
Well, reclamation is a method of full depth reconstruction.
Okay,
Where instead of having like backhoes dig it up, and, it's actually, they grind it, the asphalt in place, turn it into, through the magic of machinery, it gets turned into recycled asphalt paving.
that's a separate budget then for mill and overlay, a separate schedule and.
Yeah, I think you came in a little late, that I think you missed it. So we do, that's part of the maintenance. We do the 300-foot sections of sort of mill and overlay at the worst. See right there, this under maintenance. So that's, you've seen, we've gone like on a street, we'll just do like 300 feet of mill and overlay where the potholes are so bad that, we got to get another 5 or 10 years out of it by just doing that sort of mill and overlay. That's sort of the down and dirty kind of way of doing it. It's been very successful to address some of the worst potholed streets. But it's clearly just a repair mechanism until we can actually get to the point where the road can be reconstructed.
I have to bring up Jackson Road because that is still hanging in limbo, shall I say, given the status. Connector road, the private road, so I just would like, I know you might not have the answer tonight, but that, and then of course, I believe this, and Counselor Knells would here would probably also bring up the infamous road over there with, the brickyard and Danish.
Calvin.
If I could start, Calvin Road needs a lot of attention first as far as for, determining what goes on the street, I would say there. But with respect to Jackson Road, depending upon the numbers, Matt and I have had discussion, and Dennis, it's a very short section that's in Watertown, and that would be more than likely a mill and overlay in that section. And depending upon how the budget numbers come in from the bids there, it was our thought that if we received a bid that was a little lower than anticipated, that we might be able to look at including Jackson Road in it, in the same year's contract.
Is a mill and overlay repair?
Either in the mill and over, depending on which bid comes in best. If a full depth reconstruction reclamation comes in at a good number, we'd do it under that, otherwise under the mill and overlay,
But would be just up to the Newton line?
up to the Newton line, more street to the Newton line. But as I said there, Calvin Road there too, there's a lot of issues that need to be addressed down there, and a lot of them have been being addressed. I think they'd need to go a little bit further before we go in there and take a look at investment of a substantial dollar on the full street.
Okay, so do you want to address recommendation on,
Let me do one final.
Yeah, I got a comment just real quick too.
okay,
Then
two
just
more
one-
questions. Okay, Kenny first, and then,
Okay,
and then,
first.
Yeah, just for the folks watching at home, every counselor has, a dozen streets we could name right now, and it's not for DPW to justify and give us a status update on a potential year for those streets. This process is probably the most data-driven process that we have in town. Every single road has a number assigned to it based on its condition. We gave a funding number and schedule for how we want the DPW to select the roads that they choose. And I would love if they were all on the west end of Watertown, but that doesn't make much sense long-term. And everything we've seen tonight is a great job by DPW, continuing to work within the framework that we've set for them and do so in a way that is objectively, statistically, and data-driven every single time. So, I'm not gonna sit here and hamper about some roads that I know that I could say. So, that I cry about all the time. But you guys, great job as always.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that one of the things that might be helpful in the next time round, and I know that our job as a committee is to look at the major reconstruction roads, and you've listed the ones we're going to do this year, which is great. But is it possible to, since that slide where you had tonight's discussion, is it possible to give a sense of what the mill and overlay ones were next year? Or is that, you must have some sense of now what you're thinking about doing, and is it,
Yeah, I
is it
mean-
outrageous to ask for that, or
No,
is it something that, because you're going to put a bid out for it, or is it something that you're going to do later?
So
First of all, you know, we-
before you answer, the only thing I'd add is that, and I think it's probably your hesitation too, is that I don't want them to give, if bids come in higher than we expect and you can't do as much as you want, I wouldn't want you to name a road, get expectations up, and then not be able to complete it.
Well,
Which is just a caution, so that's
Yeah.
why I would say they're not presenting it now, but that's kind of, I would hesitate to do that.
I mean, I think the first thing I want to point out is, again, you know, some of the difficulties we had with contractors this year. We actually had 2 more rounds of mill and overlay that we were hoping to do, and we got through the first round. Again, some contractual issues, they'll be back in next year. So you didn't see a lot of mill and overlay this year, and you saw some delays between the mill and the overlay, unfortunately. But, you know, when it comes down to these kind of micro-level repairs, it's always a balancing act. You know, as soon as we start advertising small sections, 300 feet throughout town, you know, it really invites comments of, well, you did in front of his house, can you do in front of my house? Why didn't you do this? It's really a little bit too much to try and manage. So, you know, I'm a little bit hesitant to give out lists.
Okay.
If I could just add to that too, to answer your question, councilors, we don't go out to bid for specific streets on the 300-foot mill and overlay.
Oh,
We
you
go out
don't?
We go out to bid by a per ton price or a square yard price in place, without telling the contractor
Where
exactly.
you're going to
they're
do
at.
it, I see.
Quite honestly, the highway supervisor, right after the winter's over, will take another survey look around town, and he'll pick out the worst areas there in which he's trying to save. And as a matter of fact, there's gas company work on Lexington Street. You saw how atrocious that was for a while.
Yeah.
That was one of our mill and overlays this year that was added on at the last minute because it was in such terrible condition. So it's really kind of an up-in-the-air process, and it's not that we don't want to tell you exactly where,
Yeah.
but it's a moving process, too.
And you don't, as you said, that you don't bid, you
Correct.
bid generally as opposed to specifically.
That's correct.
Thank
And if I could just say again, I say every year, it's, the 300-foot is a generic number.
Yeah.
Sometimes we'll do 40 feet, we may do 600 feet,
Oh, okay.
depending upon the need. Thank you.
Okay, so what do we think about making a recommendation to the council that we recommend that this list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7 streets be included in the 2019 road project?
You want to make the
So
recommendation?
moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Lisa?
So to Councilor Woodland's point, is the grading system with what you referred to, is that something that is included with the council and voting? Since you said that you're maintaining your database or?
Yeah, we have it.
Wait, say the question again?
The PC, what's the acronym?
PCI. I mean, I'm certainly happy to provide the PCI for these streets. I think you do have to keep in mind that, you know, that was I think, 2016 windshield survey, so a street such as Chandler Street that didn't have the water main done yet is going to reflect higher than it actually is now. And you have to remember that some of that is somewhat relative and subjective. So, you know, there's certainly a couple of streets on that list that, and the greater list that look really low, and I go out there and it doesn't, I don't know if it was a problem with the program or something.
Well,
But-
I think it's fine to have whatever data you have with the date, and you guys are the ones interpreting it, and when it, when the decision comes, it's you, but I feel a level of discomfort as with the responsible to the taxpayer, how we're spending their money on the road when we just don't have any data behind it or know if we're keeping up with the data, whether it's every year
I mean,
in 3 years.
Hey, can
I'm
I
also
just-
happy
can
to
I just-
provide.
I just want to say one thing. First of all, it's not fair to characterize that there's no data for selecting these roads. So
I'm saying available.
there is data available, and there was a huge, we've done now 2 iterations of the road surface index.
13 and 16.
No, 3, because the first
2000.
one we did was in 2007, which kicked off the program in 2009 when this road program started. And many people, there's a misconception. The first year we did this, people say, well, where's my road on the list? What's the number? How come, if you do the numbers and say, okay, take the worst streets, and it's like, all right, well, why aren't we just starting with sorting the Excel spreadsheet and taking like the first 8 worst streets and doing that this year? Because there's a lot of other things to consider, whether it's, the utility work, which changes, the other development work which is going on, whether it's a main street or a side street, whether these sort of groups of street, because we don't want to have like sort of just do one street in isolation. Sometimes it's like if you look at the Chandler, Burnham and Brigham, like we did with the
those are all
Woodley, Edgecliff and Westland, sometimes it's more cost-effective to do those 3 small streets together as a group get more bang for the buck. There's a lot of other issues that go into it, and then the sort of the geographic equity. We don't want to just do all the streets in the east end, or all the streets in the west end, or all the streets in the south side. We try to do them across it. So there's a lot of other factors that go into picking the roads, and we've always cautioned the public when we've showed them this PCI study, that this is not like just a magic list that you sort it and pick the worst ones to do it. So there's a lot more that goes into it, and there's a lot of other subjective decision-making.
When we
that go
wrote
into it.
add to that, when we wrote the policy, when we got the first iteration of the PCI, we said explicitly that you shouldn't do, all the bottom ring, or all the middle ring, or all the top ring. There needs to be a balancing act, so you can preserve streets that are better off for longer with less work, and at the same time be maintaining some of the worst streets. So the money should never be in one particular area. It needs to be spaced out. It needs to be geographically dispersed. There are 20 other considerations, and that's what.
Yeah, so,
that's what
and I
we should be
think,
doing.
and I think, and then the other thing is, we do want to, we've always tried to,
We're hitting a moving target with a moving target.
right, but we
Yeah,
also,
everything's changing
we want
constantly,
to
we're
sort of
evolving.
rely on the professional judgment.
Yeah.
of
Yeah,
staff to
and
make
I think
decisions.
also, in terms of trying to tell the story, we've now done this, at least I've done this 4 times in front of you guys. Each year is a little bit different information provided, and we're certainly, we'll post that, so that sort of tells the story. And I think in 2017 was when we had a detailed discussion of the pavement management plan and all of these issues. So we can certainly put that information out there.
But, so, anyway, so, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. All I'm asking is that the information be public. I'm not saying that the public or I or anyone else should interpret the data. What I'm saying is that, to be fair to the taxpayer, you build more trust and understanding to release relevant materials that helps the DPW, and of course, the department makes a decision and a recommendation to us. But I don't know, I can tell you as a counselor, I've never been provided with the studies that you're talking about. That's all I'm saying. And of
I have
course,
one.
there are many things to
No.
consider, and there's a policy with it, and yes, you want to go down, but I'm just saying.
I remember we got a 3-ring binder of the first one, and I used to, when I was knocking on doors, have it with me.
So I guess, so the question is,
So we can always do
Can you
it.
put it up?
But
on-
it's available. It's available. It's,
So that was-
we
that
got- you
was
just gotta find it.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Yeah.
a public document.
It's all
so I
public
guess the question
information.
is it on the?
Is it on
It's
your
not on the
website?
website at this time, I don't think. The map, yeah, so I was trying, what I
Did
was
that
saying
is-
was when we did the presentation in 2016, we did put together a map that, we had a lot of discussion about what colors the streets should be and what the gradations should be. But we did put together a map that showed the PCI. I think, PCI goes from 0 to 100, so we broke it up into little levels. And the idea was we do want, some of this information should be available, but we don't want it at the the nitty-gritty level, so it was left at the macro level. So it sounds like it's still on the website.
Well, yeah, whatever, you
And
know,
if it's
whatever
not, we can certainly put it up
summarization
there.
on the website would be great, if we could just make, because you're right, that is, it was distributed as a public document, it is just a huge, it's not sort of user-friendly to town.
The first one was like this thick.
So anyway, so that's the road, so there's two other things I would like to
Oh,
raise. One is, and so there was two other things. The very last bullet point was funding collectors and / longer road. And so we actually discussed this a little bit before. We discussed it somewhat last year, or I was on the committee last year, but the committee discussed it a little bit last year. Council Palumbo actually, 2 years in a row, made that as a request in his budget priority guidelines. So we've been borrowing $2.5 million a year now for this local road program for 10 years. And I would just say, you know, you can't buy, what $2.5 million bought you 10 years ago is not necessarily what can buy you today, number one. Number two, when, you know, we've realized that there's these longer, the collector roads or the sort of these longer feeder roads that feed multiple residential streets are sort of in a different class than sort of the basic residential roads. And we really need to think about those collector roads or the longer roads serve a townwide, not just sort of the local residents who live on that. And we had talked about when we did Common Street, the lower Common Street reconstruction, that kind of investment, we actually needed more money. And we actually did, we borrowed $950,000 separately from the $2.5 million that we do for the local road construction project. So I would like to ask the committee to address that last bullet point there and say, should we ask the administration to look at actually doing that and continue to doing the $2.5 million a year for local road projects, which are basically going to be residential-only streets, and consider additional funding each year for these collector roads and longer streets. Maybe it's another $1 million a year, like we did with Common Street. But that would be bundled into a longer project that would take sometimes multiple construction seasons and require some engineering work because it would involve some geometry changes to the road, sort of like we did on Lower Common Street, like we may want to do with the Upper Waverly Avenue, like we may want to do to some other streets around town. So I want to throw that out there to the committee, because we've talked about it, you know, we've set a precedent with Common Street. Do we actually want to formalize this into the CIP and into the DPW's, you know, workflow? So that's a thought. I'm going to ask my committee members what your thoughts are, and then we'll open up to the public for, so, do you
okay.
want to go first?
Yep, fine. First off, I appreciate you bringing it up, and I have for a number of years spoken to you privately and to others, to Jerry and others about, let's just give them another $1 million, will you? And let's see if we can do a little more work. And I think last time I remember Mr. Me saying here at the last year's meeting, says that, you know, we are trying to find some other money and we're looking around to get it from other sources, and we do our best to use that as wisely as we can. But I think if it's possible, which from a sense of management, more than I'm thinking of, is it able to manage an additional funding source or to do a project? I know we're down one engineer. I know we're still working hard to find someone to fill that position. And as Councilor Petrelli said, I have made expansion of the resources for that department a priority in my priority list. So I would love the opportunity to be able to say, you know, as you said, Councilor, you know, 2.5 million doesn't buy as much as it used to buy. And you can only do so much, so is it time now to advance that a little bit? Is it helpful to advance it in such a way that it's focused on these collector roads or longer streets? That's a question I think we would have to ask the department, because it might be better to put the money into the residential streets. I don't know, but I think,
We'll do it together.
Yeah,
Thank you,
please.
Counselor. I think, I'm very encouraged by that, and I think the first question is, can we manage it? Well, we're managing it now, in a sense, with Common Street. Just remember, Common Street has two funding sources. We use Chapter 90 as well as the $950,000. Adding the $1 million to it, I think, would make a dramatic improvement. As you can take a look at, I can remember standing here years ago and doing 20 streets and 15 streets and coming down to, 12 streets, 11, and here we are tonight at 7 streets. So the dollar's changing there too. Not to give away any one street or whatever, but I mean, just some of the longer streets there, Maplewood, Highland Ave, Moore Street, some of those streets, the length of those streets would take the entire $2.5 million funding, and we'd be doing that one single street in a given year. So I do think the addition of an additional funding source, as we've talked in the past for, would certainly help it, even if they had to be broken out in multi-year cycles and divide the street up to some degree. I think it's extremely important to continue maintaining the local road program, because we're playing catch-up in one section, we're losing in the other section. I think balancing that out across and dedicating some funds to longer streets, connector streets, would be extremely important, and I would support that.
great.
The only thing, if we're most likely going to be borrowing for the funds, we probably just have to note that what's the guideline for debt service as relates to the overall operating budget, like 8%?
No more than 8, 7.5 to 8%.
7.5 to 8, so that might need to be adjusted. That's one thing to note, depending on the amount of new growth and other projections. But if we add another $1 million, we'd potentially have to adjust that number, so that priority would be between whatever, 7.75 and 8.25. But that's the only thing to note. It's obviously a great idea. I don't know how anyone could be opposed to doing more longer streets and get better roads. Yeah.
Lisa?
Thank you. I would speak in support of more funding for local roads. I'd be curious to hear what you say, especially, I don't know how the budget is going to work with trees versus how that, gets bid for if you're doing trenches. It sounds like sometimes we're also trying to put more focus on sidewalks. So, I feel like there's not enough. You could certainly use more funding, and I would support it for local roads, not just
Just a couple of points with that there too. I think you raise a good point that we've had discussion about and weren't trying to go after it this year, but not only is the dollar value increasing for the cost of what we pay, and we're getting less streets done for it, but there's other techniques like, there are dollar value increases because of the tree trenching, and we have with the tree warden at the DPW now, we're actually looking to include tree planting in the road programs, all small numbers at first. Our road program in the past didn't have any trees. It was done through the planting program. Now that we're one unit, we're looking at having under the road program trees as well. So there are different funding draws on the existing money as well.
Okay. So, what do you think? So, should we make a motion to recommend the administration add additional annual capital funding into the CIP for collector and longer roads?
It's so moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
That's
Great, great,
Did-
great.
So, and then one last,
One other thing,
I had one, I said I had,
yeah.
one other thing. So, one of the slides you said in terms of, selecting roads, it was about public input, the resident input. And as you know, we've been working on the 3 elementary school projects. And we went out and we had the 3 community presentations at the 3 elementary schools. And I would say 50% of the comments we received were about the existing very bad traffic and road conditions around the 3 elementary schools today. Forget about what we were proposing about the new buildings. It wasn't about the new buildings. It was about how bad things are today. And lots of complaints about parking, dysfunctional intersections, you know, streets with no curbs, you know, people, just sort of the free-for-all that occurs generally twice a day around the three elementary schools. We heard a lot from the public about, you know, why can't the towns get their act together on this? And if we're gonna spend $150 million on the three schools, can we at least fix the roads around the three schools? Including that, you know, understanding that there may be some changes to the orientations of the buildings, and may require some changes to the traffic circulation around schools. So the question is, you know, why can't the town look at this holistically? Why is the DPW looking at doing their thing separate from what the school building committee's doing? And as you know, the school building committee has no authority to make decisions about the roads. So I mentioned we're having this meeting, I offered to bring it up. And so perhaps for the next year's road projects, 2020 summer projects, which would align with when the constructions of the schools would be going on. Or maybe we want to do it at the same time as the school construction is going on. That we would perhaps do our local road projects for 2020 is to look at the roads around the three schools and see if we want to prioritize those so that we could solve the problems at the same time. And one of the big ones, and not just because I can see it from my house. George Street was one of the ones that was brought up.
Yep.
About just very bad condition, and also Concord Road, you know, and how it's just sort of, because there's no curbs, it just sort of leads to just sort of a lot of confusion. So anyway, I just want to, we don't have to decide tonight, unless my colleagues feel like we should make a motion and a vote on that. But,
No.
but that would be for consideration for next year, that we would actually prioritize streets that are around the schools, particularly if there needs to be some geometry changes. One of the other things that the traffic consultant that we hired for the school projects was tasked with looking at the circulation around the schools for drop-off and pickup. So if people come in, drop off, go down on a side street, turn right, one way, so sort of make one-way flow through the neighborhoods. And that may impact, you know, a wider range of roads around it. Particularly at the Cunniff School, we talked about the streets that would be on the north side of Warren. So people who are heading west could drop off, then take a right down, is that Cleveland or whatever, one of those streets. Take another right and and then take a, you know, right, and then a left and go back the way they came. So that may also, you know, look at some of those roads too that we would want to include in this project. So I just think there needs to be sort of a synchronization of the road projects that we're doing through the DPW and the construction projects we're doing through the school building committee, so that at the end of the day, what we're giving the public is something that actually functions well in the neighborhood. So I'm just throwing that out there. I don't know, your thoughts?
I mean, I think that's a good point. You know, we just are in the process of finishing up the Hosmer Safe Routes to School project, so that's something that we're very familiar with in terms of circulation and, you know, curbing and sidewalks around the schools. I guess the one caveat is we're talking about trying to add funding to the program to then tell us that we have to look at certain streets around the schools. Well, it may be important, you know, now we're taking other streets that are, you know, just, well, we're taking streets that are in a significant state of disrepair that we want to do, and we're telling them they have to wait a little bit further, so, you know, something to
I
certainly
second,
consider.
let me just say, I second your point, and I understand Councilor Picciarelli's desire. You know, everybody tries to do things in a way that shows some logic, right? And so if you're going to spend all this money on schools, then what about the roads around the school? I mean, there's common sense a little bit there, but at the same time, we're adding now another criteria. You know, we have the PC, whatever, you know, you have public input, you have the utilities, you have these other factors, and granted, you have some data, but as you said earlier, some of it's subjective. Now we're adding another criterion. So I think it's a tough one to add. I appreciate Councilor Picciarelli's point, but, I mean, adding in another one would really, I don't know. Oh, yeah, and I forgot to tell you where I live, Bates Road.
Wasn't the water main replaced on that?
Yes, it was.
Just to add to that, kind of a balancing effect, I think we've struggled with the schools for a long time with the circulation problems and the parent drop-off, which affects us dramatically from the point of safe routes and plowing and sanding and snow removal all there too. So, I mean, I think, there's a good time for discussion about what can we correct at this time going ahead with the school project as well. It's very difficult to stand here tonight. The committee was great in moving and voting to move forward with additional dollars, and to Matt's point of looking at it. But I think that's what makes it work. We all have that discussion back and forth. There's an opportunity, I see an opportunity regardless here, to correct some problems with the schools that will definitely improve it. And one of the big things with us, as Matt said, safe routes to school is so important for us. And the school children, that's the first goal. Which is why we have school zones and all the other issues, and why pedestrian aspects from the traffic calming and all of that.
I would never say that I agree that the coordination to get circulation and better streets in coordination with the school projects, that'd be great, but I would never ask you to do that as part of the road program. That would have to be something that we find the money to do, but your consultation saying to the school building committee, hey, if you guys want to do all this, it's going to cost you an additional X amount of dollars, go get us the X dollars and we'll take care of it. I think that's probably our obligation, that's our job, is to get that money, but I wouldn't say take this out and do that instead of this. It'd be in addition to, and then the school building committee and then the council would have to find the money and to add to the.
Because school building committee is, the council is providing the money. The school building committee is not providing any money.
They're making a recommendation, which would
But
include
not
discussions
Yeah,
about this
well, I'm
topic.
saying but the funding for the roads would be separate from the funding for the schools, just so we're clear. Those.
You're doing the same debt obligation,
Uh,
so it'd be the same pile of money.
One's got 5-year payback, one's got 20-year.
If we set the terms that way,
Well, no, it's state law.
you can't mandate the terms for that.
Road projects, we can only bond.
Up to 5.
Well, let's get an opinion from the DLS on that. Wait, well, we don't have to decide today. I just want to raise the issue, and whether we get to a point where, we have that discussion, because it's the buildings designs are not fixed yet. There's going to be a whole nother year of engineering design on the buildings before construction starts. But I think, there's, a lot of the public wants the roads to be, because there's a significant dysfunction and affects a lot of people. And so, in terms of making this, the most amount of citizens happy, I think we need to look at that, because people really they don't want just a patchwork thing, we're just gonna fix, like, I don't wanna say the Hosmer School, so we fixed like basically one intersection, or 2 intersections. But then, you go through that and you go right up, Concord Road the other way, and it's just, that dysfunction hasn't been fixed around that. And I just think, people saying, well, we're spending all this money, why can't we, if we're spending, $150 million, why can't we spend an extra $2 million just to fix the roads around the schools? So I think that's how we do that. We can figure out how to do it. I just think we want a commitment to the public that we are going to consider that as part of the school projects, so that we're going to give people, basically a first-class, project that includes that. If a private developer was building a new Hosmer school as a private school, we would require them to fix intersections, put in curbs, put in concrete sidewalks and that kind of stuff. So, say, well, we would require that of a private developer, but we're not gonna do that ourselves is the town, kind of.
Yep, definitely.
So we'll just table that, but put that on your list somewhere, and we'll have a discussion at a future date.
I want to take just quickly, Counselor, a former colleague has raised the question, and I want to just see if he asked me to bring it up, and I think you already know about this, but he was saying that looking at Main Street near Waverly, there's some problems with steel castings, and you're wondering whether contractors could be a little more careful about planning measurements and ask for pours, that they sort of create their own potholes. Do you know what he's, no?
I think what he asked, he sent me the same email.
Oh, he sent you the
So
same.
what, so, and he mentioned that, he mentioned Columbia Street. Well, Columbia Street does not have the final wearing layer on it, so that paving is not complete. Waverly Avenue was done as a remediation
Sure, right.
by Eversource.
Eversource.
And I think the problem is many of the castings, the manholes have sunk or over the years, so they're not, all the manholes are not at the same level. Some of them are lower than others, so when they paved it, there's sort of natural dips. That was really done as a temporary, that whole intersection is gonna be repaved, I think is what we heard, or rebuilt.
Right.
Okay, fine.
and
I just,
I-
I was out of courtesy to the former counselor that
And
I
I just
raised.
don't want, if I could just say, I think that the answer is, because it was just a mill and overlay remediation, Eversource did not have a responsibility for fixing and repairing unlevel manhole castings.
To some degree they did, but you're 100% correct in everything else there too. But it's very difficult in the colder temperatures, as we were dealing with that time, to hit the exact grades. The compaction is a little different on the asphalt there too. And sometimes that's what you get from a mill and overlay a lot of times, is because you don't get to do the full reconstruction where you have your elevations and your grades all set. Yeah, but it's still, in my mind, the answer is it's 100% improvement over what was the condition there prior to, at no cost to the town. And we have to sacrifice on a couple of manholes there.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Wait, let me just say, did anybody else from the public have any questions? Okay,
I make a motion to adjourn?
is there a second?
I was correct about this issue. Second, yes.
Which one? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.